Evan Lazar, your persistent defense of Sony Michel finally paid off on Sunday. A big game for the former first-round pick, but of course, those who were trashing him during the week, they're not just going to let sleeping dogs lie. They got. I wasn't going to name them. They got to keep going on that. So the talk now this week is, anybody I could have, and you see, I am far from a football player. I could have run for over 100 yards behind that offensive line performance on Sunday against the Dolphins. That he was the benefit of a good game plan. He still has a lot to prove. So I'm just going to ask you to do what you've been doing. Keep defending Sony Michel.
Well, both of my guys, Sony Michel and Kyle Van Noy, really shut up a lot of haters.
A big week for you.
You're right, a big week for my brand personally. But I'll say this. 77 yards after contact for Sony Michel out of 125. That doesn't sound to me like a guy that was just running behind huge holes and behind his offensive line all day. Was Sony Walter Payton? Was he Barry Sanders? No. Does he have a lot of room to grow? Absolutely. I think that he needs to be a little bit more patient with his blocking at times. He gets kind of ahead of himself a little bit, and he ends up running into the back of some guys. I think that if he can kind of pause a beat in some of those holes and wait for his blocking to develop downfield, he'll get some bigger and bigger runs. But there were some things that I really liked about Sony Michel's game. There was a carry in the third quarter where they shut down the initial hole, and he felt his way to the backside B gap and was able to bounce outside and rush for 9 yards. I mean, it was just a vast improvement from what we had seen in Jacksonville and in Detroit. So baby steps, right? And I talked about this all with Sony Michel leading up to it when everybody wanted to write him off as a bust. He's a rookie. All right, I understand he was a first-round pick, but he was a rookie that was in his third career NFL game. We saw him take a step forward. Let's continue to see him take steps forward in the future.
I do want to mention, though, and yes, I am in the same vein that I think he did play better than he did in Detroit. The yards after contact, that's not an offensive line stat, but I don't want to take anything away from how great the Patriots' offensive line played.
Yeah, they were terrific.
And to me, the question now becomes, the blocking's not going to be what it was against Detroit every week. It'll be better than that. But I don't necessarily know that it's going to be what it was last week against Miami every week. I think that there has to be somewhere in between, and he has to prove that in that in-between space, he can still be an effective running back.
Right. Well, I think that what he needs to prove is two things. One, he hasn't really shown much elusiveness yet. And I don't know how much of that is to do with his knee and the knee injury that he had. It was a meniscus injury, which whenever a ligament in your knee is the issue, acceleration and elusiveness, jump cuts, that type of stuff is always a big question mark, right? You hear it all the time with players that come back from ACLs, how their agility isn't the same as it was in the past because of the ACL injury. I think the same thing happens with the meniscus. So I think that there's a little bit of that, a little bit of the injury coming back. And the other thing is he's got to have a little bit better feel for his blocking. That comes with time. That's not something that's just going to happen right away. New system, new blocking schemes. Once he gets those two things down, I really think that we're going to see a good running back. Do I think that he's going to be Todd Gurley? No, but Todd Gurley was a top 10 pick. This guy wasn't. He was a fringe second-round pick. Let's be honest. It was a 31st pick in the draft. Yeah. This wasn't a guy that was Saquon Barkley at number 2 or something like that, where they invested a ton of draft capital like the Giants did. So I think that for the 31st pick in the draft, what we got on Sunday was 31st pick in the draft production. So we'll see moving forward if he can continue to do that.
The one other aspect of his game I want to see him work on, and you mentioned the elusiveness, you mentioned the patience, and I do think that those will come, but not just to be a successful NFL running back, but to be a successful Patriots running back.
Yeah.
You have to be a factor in the passing game,
yeah,
both blocking and catching the ball. He's had a couple of bad drops early. He wasn't a major factor in the passing game against the Dolphins. Now, when James White's playing the way he did, they don't need him to be, but I want to see him get on the same page as Tom Brady. I want to see him be a little more reliable in the passing game. That's going to make me feel a lot better because you said, 31st pick, but he was a first-round pick. He is a guy that they do have a lot invested in. He doesn't need to be a 3-down back here, but I want to see him have the potential to be a 3-down back, and that doesn't come until he steps it up a little bit in the passing game.
Yeah, that's a fair criticism. I think that at Georgia, he showed flashes of being able to be a pass-catching back, but they really didn't use him at all in that role. I mean, his senior season, I think he only had 1 or 2 catches. Or his last year, I can't remember if it was his senior year or his junior year, but he only had like 1 or 2 catches on the whole season.
Yep.
It just wasn't something that they did a lot with their running backs at Georgia. They weren't a heavy running back pass-catching team like the Patriots are. So I agree. I think that we need to see that, although I do think that he's a very good pass blocker, and he showed that at Georgia as well, that he can stand up guys on blitzes and stuff like that and pick up and pass protection. So maybe that's kind of the role that he ends up having, is you put him on the field and you run a lot of play action, run some passes out of shotgun where he's more of a pass protector than he is a receiver. But obviously I know everybody wants to see him catch the ball out of the backfield. They really didn't do that a lot with him in Miami, against Miami. I think that taking that element of the game out of it kind of made him more confident running the football. So we'll see what happens moving forward with that.
Sony Michel, you done labeling him a bust? Are you ready to label him a success? Let us know in the comments below or on Twitter @PatriotCLNS. From Gillette Stadium, he's Evan Lazar. I'm Alex Barth.